Welcome to the Chuck Shoot Podcast, and thank you for checking out my show. We have a very well-established musician today on the show, drummer Steve Riley. So he's played with many very well-known bands, including Steppenwolf, Keel and W.A.S.P. Of course, he's most well-known for being the drummer of L.A. Guns. And despite his impressive resume, he's a very down-to-earth guy, very nice, and it was a pleasure to chat with him. We discuss his whole career, plus the new album he's got out with L.A. Guns called Renegades. Also some movie stuff, and I'll get his thoughts on some of the recent stuff in the press that his ex-bandmate Phil said. I think you'll really enjoy this interview, whether you're a diehard LA Guns fan or you thought LA Guns was a firearms store. I think you're really going to like this. Check it out. Welcome to the Chuck Shoot Podcast, Steve Riley, drummer of LA Guns and some other bands that we'll talk about too. But let's start. I want to go through your whole musical career. You've had quite a career. So if we could start at the beginning. You grew up in Revere, Massachusetts, which I guess Glenn Danzig is also from that town. I don't know if you knew that. And you've been all over the world with LA Guns and stuff, but tell me about growing up near Boston.
It's a funny thing because, I grew up in Revere. It's just like right outside of Boston. It's North Boston. And, I grew up with, it was a small music community there. One of the guys I grew up with was Frank DiMino from Angel.
Oh.
And, yeah, we both grew up in Revere. We were both in a marching band. He played clarinet. I played snare drum. And he was like the first guy in Revere to break out of that scene and start his career, And growing up in Revere, I kind of knew that once I graduated Revere High School, that I was going to have to kind of move on into whatever city I was going to go to. But I knew the music scene in Boston was kind of small, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity. So I knew once I graduated in 73 that I was going to eventually move, and that's what I did. I ended up moving out of Revere with Frank DiMino, and we both went down to Washington, D.C., and we were in a band in D.C. together called Max, and that's where Angel came out of one of those bands.
Oh, I didn't even know that part. But so you were inspired musically by Jeff Beck, and you actually got to meet him once. But what about, who are your favorite drummers or drummers that you were inspired by?
I started playing drums so young that my dad turned me on to a bunch of jazz guys, and I really got hooked on Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich.
Oh.
They were like very, very influential in everything that I did. And Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa are like gods to me. And, I started playing when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
That's
young.
I've been playing my whole life. And I actually started playing before I had discovered the Beatles with my older sister. And so rock kind of came after me starting to play drums. And so, Ringo was a big influence, and Charlie Watts and Ginger Baker. But that really came after me really being hooked on Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich.
Okay. Very cool. So 75-ish or 74, you actually ended up moving to LA, right? And then is that when you worked with Todd Rundgren with a band called Roadmaster, which they have this on Spotify. I listened to some of it. It holds up pretty well. I mean, it sounds like 70s rock, but it's good 70s rock, very melodic. Did you think at that time, even being in that band and working with Todd Rundgren, did you feel like you had made it? I mean, you guys were opened up for some pretty big artists.
Yeah, the thing with the Roadmaster was when I was in DC, there were 3 bands. There was Max, Cherry People, and Daddy Warbucks. Those 3 bands formed Angel, and they actually broke up 3 bands when they formed Angel because key members left each of those bands. When that happened, that was like in about late 74, early 75. I got a call from a band in Indianapolis called Roadmaster, and they were getting ready to do an album. And they asked me to come out. My connection was somebody from DC had already gone out there, a friend of mine, the guitar player, Ricky Bennett. He had already gone out there and joined Roadmaster. And he called me and said that they were going to let their drummer go, and they were getting ready to record an album. And it was an independent album. It was done with an independent label in Indianapolis. And Todd Rundgren came in and brought the band out to Bearsville, New York to do the songs, and we did a couple of more songs with the producer in Indianapolis, but Todd did most of the album. And yeah, that was the first album I did, Chuck, and that was a high point in my career. I mean, I thought that, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm on my way right now, and little did I know there was going to be a lot more to come after
Sure.
that. I did the one album with Roadmaster, and I asked them, because I knew I needed to end up in Los Angeles. I knew that was my final destination because that's where everything was happening. And Angel had already been out here telling me how good it was with all the machinery, management, record labels, everything. So I had asked the guys in Roadmaster if they were going to relocate now that we have things going, because Indianapolis is kind of like a high place to get things going.
Sure.
And I did a bunch of shows with Roadmaster in the Midwest, and we opened up for Rush on their big tour, and so we got a nice dates, but they didn't want to relocate, so I ended up leaving Roadmaster and coming to LA to play with Mickey Jones from Angel.
And didn't you briefly join a version of Steppenwolf?
I did. Once I was out here with Mickey Jones, we had started a band called Empire and tried to get it off the ground. It was very difficult. We just didn't, for some reason, be able to get it off the ground. And during that period, I got a call from Steppenwolf to see if I wanted to go out and tour with them. And it wasn't any recording. It was just they were touring a lot. And I was young. I was like 20 years old. And I took up right away. I said yes. And I went out with them for a couple of years. And I toured with Steppenwolf and did that whole great catalog of material that they had,
That's
so
a great
fun.
catalog.
It was great touring with them.
Yeah, that's cool. So then, and then you did some other bands, the Lawyers, the Bees. And then this was interesting. This is like one of the reasons that I wanted to interview, because I had Ron Keel on here a few episodes ago. And you would, obviously you were in Keel for a little bit. And he told me, I was asking him, I was like, what is the secret to this guy's success? Because you've been in so many big bands. I mean, most people would have killed just to be in Roadmaster or W.A.S.P, or like you're in all these things. And he said, well, you're definitely driven. So that was like, and it was interesting. You recorded that first album with Keel, but then you left to join W.A.S.P. Like, how did you know that W.A.S.P would be bigger? Because Keel was a pretty big band too. I mean, you kind of hedged your bet with W.A.S.P. Like, in hindsight, I mean, I think you made the right call, but how did you know? Were you just taking a chance, basically?
Yeah, when I did the album with the Bees, I had done a bunch of one-off albums with people, and for some reason or another, they didn't get going, or they didn't go on to a second album. When I did the album with the Bees, Tom Werman produced it. It was another high point because we were on Epic Records, a major label. Again, they didn't take off for one reason. It was a great band, great guys. We had a great situation, but it didn't take off. So when I came, when I got out of the Bees, I started doing like small session work, just anything to work. It could be like a really small session for like $100 to play with some lawyer that wanted to record a couple of songs,
Yeah, because I was trying to find a record of all the session work you've done. I can't find it. So it was nothing major, but it was enough to pay money.
That's all it was.
Okay.
It was really to pay bills. And what I did was I did that for a couple of years here in LA. On one of those sessions, Greg Chasen, the bass player who went on to be in Badlands, he wasn't in Badlands at the time, but he was just doing that session with me. He told me to call Keel. And he said, they're getting ready to go into the studio with Gene Simmons. They're on A&M Records. And I called Keel. I asked him if I could come down and play for them. I did play for them, and everything worked out cool. And they wanted me to do the album. And so I ended up doing the album in another great situation. Here I am in the record plant in New York. I mean, in LA, the old record plant. I'm with Gene Simmons producing A&M Records. The guys in Keel were great. And they were really making noise around LA Keel. And so after I finished doing all of my drum tracks, we were doing the background vocals for Keel. And I'm in the record plant, and I got a call from Blackie from W.A.S.P. And he said, I hear that you came in and you were able to do the Keel album real quick, because it was a quick turnaround. I joined Keel, did 2 weeks of pre-production, and went right in and recorded with them. And so he said, I heard how that situation went down. will you come by my apartment and give me a talk? So after one of the sessions with Gene doing the background vocals for Keel, I went over to Blackie's apartment and he played me W.A.S.P's new album. Now Keel was doing the Right to Rock while W.A.S.P was doing their first album. And so I went over to Blackie's apartment and he played me the first album. I was blown away. I thought it was great. And he told me what kind of machine they had built around them. They had the Iron Maiden management. They were on Capitol Records. They had this big world tour already booked.
Okay.
And he said to me, would you be interested in doing this? And it was a really hard decision because I knew I had something great going with Keel.
Yeah.
But what Blackie was describing to me and what they had with Iron Maiden's people, I had to take it. It was just too good to pass up. And so it was very difficult to tell Ron and the guys in Keel, because they were so great to me, and I still am friends with all of them, that I'm going to leave and do this thing with Keel or with W.A.S.P.
Yeah.
And yeah, in hindsight, it was the best decision. But the reason was because I was always looking for a bigger and better situation. And it sounds kind of like, a hard case for somebody to say, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do that. But in this business, you have to make that kind of a hard decision. And so I did, and I left Keel and I joined W.A.S.P. and I stayed with W.A.S.P. for about 4.5 years.
Yeah. So you did 3 albums with them, 2 studio and then 1 live. And this was interesting though, like looking at the research, the band was a target of the P.M.R.C, which for people who don't know what that is, it's a Parents Music Resource Center. They called your band W.A.S.P. Sexual perverts, and they put you on the Filthy 15. Like I remember this as a kid, even like censorship was a big thing in the 80s with music. Like I feel like there was a lot of like religious people or whatever you call them. They would call music, like sexual perverts or Satanism or, all these, they look for all these themes. I feel like people were looking for that in the 80s. Do you feel like that's kind of come full circle again, where censorship, maybe not necessarily with the Satan stuff, but a lot of more censorship seems to be popping its head up back with movies and music and social media? And talk about that. What's your thoughts on that?
I got to tell you, Chuck, it's the funniest thing. When I look back on that, the whole LA out scene was during Reagan and Bush presidencies.
Mm-hmm.
It's so ironic. You would think that a scene like what we had wouldn't be able to thrive in a Reagan-Bush era because of how conservative they are.
Sure.
But when P.M.R.C. came out, they thought they were going to hurt us by putting a label on our records. It turned out to be just the opposite. It helped our sales. Everybody's sales were going through the roof because, kids are going to want to listen to something their parents don't want them to listen to. So it turned out to be an ironic situation. The sales went through the roof. Everybody was doing great.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree with you that today the conservative look on everything entertainment is really, their thumbprint is everywhere right now. And it is very difficult to get anything like what we were doing, especially W.A.S.P. I don't know if W.A.S.P. could thrive today because of how over the top it was. I mean, we had a girl on the rack and we were cutting her throat and we were throwing meat out at the audience, and we had Tormentor songs and F Like a Beast. And we were like, I don't know if that could go over today because of the way the censorship is thriving right now. And it's really got a
people are scared to do that kind of stuff. I mean, the feminist movement has really, they've really cracked down on a lot of those things as inappropriate. Maybe some of it obviously rightfully so, but I feel like in that case, it was more for entertainment, but I don't know. It's an interesting discussion, at least.
It was definitely for entertainment, but I can't see the Me Too movement accepting a girl on a rack being cut up. And it's crazy. And she's half dressed.
Yeah.
That would not go over today.
No. You could, if it was a white male, you could do whatever you want to it, but no, a girl, I would not. I wouldn't mess with that. That's a gamble. So yeah, but you look back on your time in W.A.S.P. and you say the only regret is that you wish it had lasted longer. You wish that they hadn't disbanded because you guys thought, or you thought you had something special, and you wish that lineup had stayed together for another album or two, right?
Oh, totally. And I think that the original lineup of me, Blackie, Chris Holmes, and Randy Piper, I thought not only were we theatrically great on stage and we had a great stage show, but sonically and song-wise, we were really, really good. And we were really making the headliners work hard to follow us. I mean, we got crowds going crazy and we were doing really well. And Blackie, for some reason, slowly broke the band up. He fired Randy Piper, which changed the dynamics of the band completely because he went from bass to guitar with Blackie. And that changed the dynamics immensely. And so then we did an album with Johnny Rod, and I liked the way Electric Circus came out, but I thought that the band had a lot longer legs with the original lineup. I just wish the original lineup could have stayed together longer, like Motley did. You know, Motley played it great, and they stayed together, whether they had beefs or not. They stayed together. They knew they had a great band with great songs, and they made the right call. And I just wish W.A.S.P. had done the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you kept going though. You persevered, and this is I think a lot of people might, people who are maybe casual rock fans or even casual LA Guns fans may not know the story of LA Guns, how it was LA Guns and there was a band called Hollywood Rose. And when they combined the two bands, that's how they came up with Guns N' Roses. But I think before you joined the band, there was a short time where I think was Axl Rose. He was the singer of LA Guns, right? Or was it Tracii Guns the singer?
I understand. Because, Chuck, I told this in some other interviews that I was fortunate to be, the LA scene lasted from 82 to 92. Probably longer than any city has ever had a thriving scene. Straight through. Usually it's about a 5-year period, and then that city's main thing kind of breaks down. LA went for 10 years. I was really fortunate. I was involved with this first wave of metal with W.A.S.P., Motley, Dokken, Rat, Great White, all of these bands. I was involved with that. We were all so busy touring and recording that we didn't realize in 86, early 87, we didn't realize a second wave of rock was coming out of LA. And that was with Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat, Jet Boy. We didn't realize that this was happening because we were all so busy and we weren't really in the city a long time to see this happening. We're always on the road. So I got to be involved with both waves of the LA scene. What I don't really know, even after being in LA Guns for so long, is that early history. I know Axl was involved. I know they got the name Guns N' Roses, how they got the name, and they melded two bands together. But I think they were all really short periods of time where all of these guys were involved with each other. And then in early 87, the classic lineup of LA Guns really started this whole scene with LA Guns. And I really know from that point on, the early scene, I'm not quite sure. I just know Axl was involved with it for a little bit.
They were all mixed.
Yeah, it was
Do you think that
mixture of people.
That must have helped the band get signed, right? The whole Guns N' Roses connection?
Yeah, but you know what? I really believe that it boils down to the songs. When I got out of LA, when I got out of W.A.S.P., I was living still in a nice apartment in Hollywood, but I didn't have a place to play drums. And I went down to SIR Studios, rented a small room just to stay loose on my drums, because I knew I was going to do something. I didn't know quite what I was going to do. And when I was at SIR Studios, these guys from LA Guns, they were big fans of W.A.S.P. They came in and they said hi to me, and they could hear me playing. And they said they handed me a tape with all scribbling on it. It was their first album that they had just recorded, and it wasn't even pressed yet. When I listened to it, they said, listen to it and see if you're interested in joining, because we're going to let our drummer go. And it boils down to the songs, Chuck. When I listened to LA Guns' first album, I heard great songs. And so I know that maybe the connection was all there. But remember, GNR also hadn't taken off
That's
yet.
true.
They had
Yeah.
just recorded their first album. They were still doing clubs here in LA. So the connection might have been there, but I really believe it came down to both bands having really good songs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know?
So during that time up until 91, I mean, that was those first few albums were the peak of popularity for the band. A lot of success. You had good record sales, tours, videos on MTV, the whole thing. When you look back on that time, are those like some of your happiest years of your life, or is there a lot of stress going on behind the scenes that we didn't see?
I think that it was some of the happiest times of my life because I always feel fortunate. I know that you have to have talent to get going in this business, but you really have to have timing and luck on your side. And that timing is so important. So when I got out of W.A.S.P, I knew I was going to do something, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So to be able to join something like LA Guns from the very beginning and watch it take off and get more and more popular. And we were all over MTV. We had songs all over the radio. We were doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, E&R was huge.
Yeah,
they were like Van Halen. They were just gigantic. But we also had a really good run with gold and platinum albums. And we were all over MTV and the radio. And we were touring the world. And I just thought I was so fortunate. I was with a bunch of guys that were really into it. And it was a really happy time from 87 all the way up to 92. It was just a great period.
Yeah. So 92, you left the band. What not from you rejoined in 94, but from 92 to 94, what did you do for that time? Were you doing session work and stuff, or?
Yeah, I did the same thing. You know, I had a falling out with Phil Lewis, but the falling out with Phil Lewis was coupled with Tracii not really wanting to continue on with the band. He wanted to do his new band called Killing Machine, and he wanted to do something different.
Okay.
So the band really splintered at the same time. Even though Vicious Circle was done, everybody flew their parts in. Nobody was really in the studio at the same time. It was a very chaotic period for LA Guns, and the band was splintering.
Okay.
From what I did in 92 to 94, I had recorded probably like about 3 or 4 albums with people that were either looking for a record deal or going to get a record deal, and it didn't happen.
Okay.
I went through that before, earlier in the 80s, and I had done so much session work in that period, again, to pay the bills and to stay active. And it was a kind of a fun period, but you know, it was kind of chaotic too because I was all over the place.
Yeah. So none of those albums that you recorded saw the light of day or went or got major label success or anything?
No.
But you got paid, right?
I done a number of them, and I have them all on my computer, and I revisit them once in a while. Some of them were really good, and you can't understand why they didn't get signed. But again, you know, grunge was laying down big and heavy at that point. So, you know, anything that wasn't in that mold too was very difficult to get signed. So I understand, but I had done so much recording during that period that never made the light of day, but I have it still, you know.
Did you cross paths with anyone that would later go on to do something big, or?
You know what? Not really. I mean, the people that I played with are the people that really took off and made it. And the people that I tried to do stuff with, or I sat in on their sessions and helped them record some material, it just didn't get up a ground. I mean, Jimmy, the keyboard player from Blondie, he recorded this whole album here in LA, and I played the drums on it. He produced it, and it was with this English guy, and the whole album was done. The singer, there was a bunch of people that guest starred on it. I figured this thing would really take off and get signed, and it didn't. So, you know, you never know in this business. It's difficult.
Yeah, that's crazy. So then you end up reuniting with LA Guns, and you guys did, I mean, there was a bunch of different versions of the band and different lineup changes, but you stayed with them until about 2016. And then this is where it gets kind of hazy or messy because you guys kind of split off. So there's 2 versions of the band, I guess you'd call it. Now, how does that work? Like with the website and the social media, how do you guys divide that kind of thing up?
Well, when Tracii decided to quit, when the original lineup, the classic lineup broke up, the three guys, Phil, Mick, Cripps, and Kelly Nichols, they all left the band in late 95, early 96.
Mm-hmm.
That's when Tracii and I decided to stay together. We were partners. We wanted to keep moving on with LA Guns. And we did. We did 3 albums with 3 different singers, with Jizzy Pearl, Michael Starr from
Steel Panther.
Yeah, it's Steel Panther. And we did one with Chris Van Dahl.
He's really good too.
American Hardcore. And so me and Tracii continued on. And then we eventually talked Phil into coming back in to do an album with us. And
Man on the Moon, I think, right?
Man on the Moon.
Yeah.
Yes, and he came back to do Man on the Moon. And actually, we got him back in to do Black Beauties, the greatest hits, because we wrote 5 new songs for that. And then we did Man on the Moon. So it was me, Phil, and Tracii continuing on from 2000 until about 2002. And in 2002, Tracii decided to leave to go do Brides of Destruction with Nikki.
Sure.
And from Motley. And me and Phil, we decided, and I never really wavered. I was like, let's keep moving on. I was always trying to talk the classic members into staying, Chuck. I always thought LA Guns had a great thing going. We had a great catalog. We could tour all the time. We could do a lot of stuff, and we had a great name all over the world. And so me and Phil decided to go on from 2002 on to 2016. But in 2008, 2006, 2007, right in there, Brides didn't take off. Brides of Destruction didn't take off. And a couple of other things Tracii had tried to do didn't take off. So he decided to start a second LA Guns. That's when it really started, the 2 LA Guns. It started in about 2007, and Phil and I were kind of irked at the time because we were moving on. We had recorded albums. We were in the studio with Andy Johns doing albums. And when Tracii decided to start that second LA Guns with a bunch of cast of characters too. I mean, he had a bunch of singers come in and out. And that was really when I had to start dealing with knowing there were going to be 2 bands because both of us own the name. Tracii and I own the name. We were partners.
Are you 50-50 partners on the name? So yes, Phil's not even a partner in the name.
No, it was me and Tracii because Tracii and I had continued on with the band.
And you copyrighted it or something? Or how?
Yeah,
okay.
And we trademarked the name together, and we were partners, me and Tracii, and really close too. And we were totally shoulder to shoulder on everything. But, in 2007, when he started that second LA Guns, while me and Phil were out as LA Guns, that's when I had to start dealing with it and knowing that there's not much I can do. I just have to deal with it. And so Tracii did that up till 2012. Me and Phil are still recording with Andy Johns. We did 4 albums with him. And that's when Tracii decided he didn't want to do his LA Guns anymore. And he was going to do something different.
Sure.
And, me and Phil continued on for another 4 more years until Phil decided he was going to do some shows with Tracii. That's all he said to me. I'm going to do some shows. And I was like, I knew the 2 guys didn't really get along, Chuck. They never really did. And the other classic members know this too. The 2 guys, though, they never really got along. They put up with each other, and that was good enough. If you could put up with each other, you just deal with it.
Why didn't they get along, though? What was the issue?
There was always an issue, and we couldn't really figure it out. Kelly Nichols, Mick, Cripps, and myself, we just knew that they did not really get along. There was something there in between them that we could not figure out, and we just never were able to figure it out. But we knew it was there. So when Phil decided to do shows with Tracii, it came out of the blue. I was like, really, And so I had to accept it, and they were just going to do shows, and I was going to continue on with LA Guns. I was going to do what I had always done, just keep moving forward. And Phil laid it down like he was just going to do about 5-6 months of shows with Tracii and then come back and do LA Guns with me. But that's not really what happened.
Sure.
And then Kelly came in, and this is where we're at.
Right. So was there ever a thought with when in 2016, at that point, when you're splitting it off, to changing the name or differentiating it from the other version, like call it Steve Riley's LA Guns or the LA Guns or the new LA Guns, or maybe just going a different route altogether and calling it Hollywood Guns or LA Bands Guns, or, you know, something totally different. Cause it just seems confusing. Like even with Spotify, I'm listening to your new album, which is great, by the way. We'll get to that in a minute. But you know, it's confusing on the new album because you've got your version and Traci's version. They're on the same Spotify. So it's like a little bit confusing for fans, I think sometimes, right?
Well, yeah. And you know, I think people have to remember when these two started doing shows together in 2017, they went out as Tracii Guns and Phil Lewis. They didn't go out as LA Guns.
Sure.
They made that decision later on down the line that they wanted to call it LA Guns again and stay together. So I continued LA Guns on while these guys were doing Tracii Guns and Phil Lewis shows. They were not calling themselves LA Guns at all for a while. And then they decided down the line to call it LA Guns. So I never really considered calling it anything different because I was continuing on with the same process that I had always continued on. I know it's confusing. It's something I wish that wasn't happening, but it's also something that I don't think I really created. I was just moving on. The classic members were leaving and coming and leaving and coming. And I was staying straight and keeping the band going, getting record deals for the band, getting management, just pretty much setting up everything. I was doing all the business from 87 to now. And it's not something I really wanted to do, but I knew that I had to do it. Nobody else really wanted to do it. So I've always done the business for the band. I just continued on. These guys were doing shows as Tracii and Phil. And, you know, I never really wavered from LA Guns because Phil just left again, but he wasn't breaking up the band. He said, I'll be back. So I was continuing on. I got Kelly in and I continued on as LA Guns. It is confusing. What we're trying to do on our end is whatever we do, we're putting our names underneath what we're doing. Kelly does all of the artwork. He's putting Steve Riley, Kelly Nichols, Kurt Foley, Scott Griffin on everything we do. We're trying to make it as clear as possible, but it's also something that I feel really connected to, and I'm not just going to walk away from LA Guns because a classic member has left. I'm one of the classic members and I haven't left, and I've always been making the band go. So I really never wavered from that at all.
So after you split off with Phil and Tracii, those guys have slung some mud your way. They've posted memes. They've said some mean comments in the press. I know you said you won't sling mud back, and I haven't seen you do that. But you have to have seen some of the things that these guys have said. Now, obviously there are fans slinging mud and press saying comments too. But Phil and Tracii, I mean, they were your bandmates for many. I mean, Phil longer than Tracii, but Tracii too. Does it hurt you to hear those things? And if not, how do you not let that stuff bother you?
You can't let it bother you. If you have that kind of a thin skin, you won't last in this business. Of course, these are former partners and bandmates of mine, co-songwriters. We've done so much together. For them to say anything like Kelly can't play bass, Steve can't play drums, they can't write. Well, Kelly wrote Ballad of Jane. He wrote our biggest hit. Me and Kelly played rhythm section on everything and co-wrote everything from the early years. The five of us co-wrote everything. We're really connected to this band, and we know what our worth was in the band. We know what we bring to the table, and we know how good we are as a rhythm section too. Kelly, like I said, wrote the biggest hit that we ever had. He brought that gist of a song in Ballad of Jane. We finished it in the studio, but that's one of Kelly's songs. And so to say that we can't play our instruments, to me, I think I have a lot more faith in the fans to know that that sounds foolish to them. I don't think that I would get all the gigs and all the bands I've been in if I couldn't play drums. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how could I play all the double kick drums that Blackie wanted me to play in W.A.S.P, the double kick drums in Keel, all of the early stuff from LA Guns, if I couldn't play drums? And the same with Kelly if he couldn't play bass. So to say childish things like that, Kellyanne, we're not going to even go there.
Yeah.
We're not going to try to sling it back and say, yeah, but they can't play too. We wouldn't even think of saying something like that because we have a lot of respect for those guys.
Sure.
And I think they do too, but they get carried away.
Sure. And you said like if you did ever reunite, you don't want to look back and say that you said a bunch of stuff. So one more thing before I want to get into the Renegades album and your new version of LA Guns. But one more thing, did you see the latest news that Phil recently said Vince Neil's a total hack who couldn't sing his own songs and murdered Razzle?
Terrible, Chuck. That is such a bad thing to do in this business. You're talking about one of the biggest bands in the world, one of the most iconic hard rock metal bands in the world. I have nothing but respect. I know those guys, and I have nothing but respect for Motley Crue all the way through. It doesn't matter what they did, how they did it, when they did it. I have so much respect for those guys for what they did. They're immense in this scene. They're iconic. And to jump into a fray like that and for no reason and say something like that, it's just another ridiculous thing to do. It's only going to work against you. They have millions of fans that love them. So if you're going to say something like that about Vince, who's a great guy, he's perfect for Motley Crue. He isn't Paul Rodgers. He never pretended to be Paul Rodgers. He is great for Motley, perfect for Motley. His voice is perfect for them. To say something bad about Vince is just uncalled for. I don't know why he would do that, if it's just to try to get attention or to try to get press. It's not good press. It's only going to work against you. I never believed in saying anything bad about anybody in this business, even if it's somebody that isn't a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go there.
That's smart though, because you've obviously had a long career. So let's talk about, now you're putting together, a different version of LA Guns. Now this is interesting. I had Michael Grant on. He was in both versions of LA Guns, and this is another reason I wanted to interview you. He said that, he goes, yeah, Steve Riley called me and he goes, I didn't even answer the phone because I know how convincing he can be. So that's like a compliment though. Like, and that's another reason I was like, I got to talk to this guy. Like, so were there other musicians that you reached out to that maybe didn't answer their phone or turned you down?
Yeah. When I first was offered to do the M3 show, and I actually got offered to do it in 2018 and I turned it down. I was actually working on a bunch of other stuff, and I got called from the promoter of M3 to see if I wanted to put an LA Guns together, a lineup to just do the show. He said fans would love to hear the material, and Phil and Tracii don't want to do it. And I said, no, I don't really want to do that right now. I said, and so he called me in 2019 too. And he said, would you want to do M3? He said, again, I want to tell you, the fans just want to hear LA Guns songs. And so what I approached that as, I had Kelly Nichols with me. I said, Kel, let's do this. Let's just check it out and go have fun. We'll bring a guitar player and singer with us. And Scotty Griffin came into the fold because we had already known him. He was with the band for a number of years as the bass player, and he's really a lead guitar player. So I said, Scotty, why don't you play lead? And then I was looking for a singer. Somebody in Vegas told me, check out Kurt Froelich, and I did. So we didn't have to go through an audition process with anybody in this lineup that's playing with me and Kelly Nichols. We found Kurt right away, and he was the guy that we liked, and Scotty was a no-brainer. We went into M3 thinking, let's go have fun, and we'll do this show, see what happens, and no big expectations. Let's see what goes on. And we did the show. It went over so good, and the reviews were so good. Somebody had filmed the whole thing, put it up on the internet. We saw the feedback. From that, we got New Breed Management out here in LA. They were Primary Wave. They're a huge management company. And Eric Baker and Bobby Collin, and they wanted to sign us right away to a management deal. We went with them. They brought us to Golden Robot Records. Things snowballed so quick from the M3 show. We didn't even know it was going to happen. There was no master plan. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to do this and then go do that. It just happened. We got management. They brought us to Golden Robot Records. Golden Robot watched the show. They loved it, and they said, yes, let's do a record with you guys. And 4 months later, we're in the studio recording Renegades. So it happened so fast.
Yeah.
We you know.
Did you reach out to Mick Cripps to try to see if he wanted to come back?
Yeah, your initial question was when me and Kelly decided to do this, I had reached out to Jizzy Pearl to see if he wanted to sing.
Okay.
I had reached out to Michael Grant, and Michael was already, I didn't realize what he had gone through with Phil and Trace. They let him down big time. They dropped him like a bomb. And Michael's a good guy. And he's a great player.
And he's brilliant guitar and songwriter and singer. His new album is amazing. If you haven't heard it.
And he's a good guy. And they dropped him, and I didn't even realize that. But that's probably why he didn't take my call. He probably knew I was going to be persuasive too and say, come on, Mike, do this. But he was probably already still hurt from what happened with him and Trace and Phil.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand now, they really hurt him and just let him go. And he was making an effort to make that work with them. And I also reached out to Stacey Blades, who had done a bunch of albums with us. And he was doing something else too. So I had reached out to a number of people, and they all didn't want to do it. And now looking back, I love all those guys, and I wish them nothing but the best. But I'm so glad with the way this happened, and Kelly, Scotty, and Kurt fell into place.
Because you said the chemistry is really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
It totally is.
And you said the new album, I like this. You say it's kind of more of a promotional item to show that the band is fresh. Like, you're not really thinking that you're going to sell a lot of copies or license a lot of this music, but it's kind of a promotional item to promote the band.
Yeah, and I felt that way years ago. I felt this way, like starting almost like in the early 2000s, Chuck. I always felt like I knew when the record stores shut and the big machinery was shutting down, radio and MTV were gone. I knew that when you do an album now, you're not looking at doing major sales. It really is turning into a promotional item for touring. And since we're a classic rock band, we are touring more than recording. So a recording is really, you're hoping that you sell a lot of copies, but you're not banking on it because of the situation with radio and MTV and record stores. So you're really using it as a promotional item. And I always felt that any band, no matter how old they are in stature, like if you're 25-year-old band, 30-year-old band, to record is such a great thing for your soul as a musician. To create new music is something good for yourself anyways, and you're really doing it so you're being creative still. But that product is turning into a promotional item for touring and getting the band out there on nice tours.
But you are getting a lot of downloads on Spotify and YouTube and stuff. And I heard the album, and I'm just, to be honest, I mean, I really like it. I think it's good. The single Crawl is really great. It's really catchy. I've been listening to all the songs, Why Ask Why and Well-Oiled Machine, just classic LA Guns rockin' songs. You Can't Walk Away is the ballad. And then Wood. That almost sounds kind of like an Alice in Chains kind of Jar of Flies type acoustic thing. Was that on purpose?
We're all four of us, right? So when we started the pre-production for Renegades, we had started it because we all live all over the country. Kurt's in Florida, Scotty's in Vegas, I'm in LA, Kelly's in New York. So we knew that with the tight budget, it was going to be very difficult to get everybody together to do the old pre-production, whereas it was going to be us in the same city, meeting up the next day at the studio and writing songs together. So we started the pre-production by sharing files over the internet and sharing ideas on what we could do with the songs. We had all been sitting on a lot of songs. I wrote You Can't Walk Away in the 80s. And for some reason, it didn't get recorded.
Okay.
So, we had been sitting on a lot of material and exchanging it. And Kurt is a great singer-songwriter, guitarist. He had a lot of material. When we had started exchanging files, Wood came in towards the end of us exchanging these files, and he brought that song in, and we were like, whoa, this song is amazing. And it was pretty much completed. We did some tinkering and some production on it in the studio, but I knew this was a great album track. I don't know because of the length of it if it could be a single, but I just knew that it was a great song and it has a great identity to it. And that's all Kurt Foley.
Yeah, the whole album is great, and there's not a bad song. There's 10 really good songs. Now I know Kelly, he sang on Nothing Better to Do in a Vicious Cycle. I know you weren't on that album, but would he ever, now that he's back in the band, would he ever sing that live? Or he didn't sing on this album, did he?
No, he did. What he did was we made him sing it at the M3 show.
Oh,
so you check that M3 show out. He's singing Nothing Better to Do. It's in the set.
That's awesome. Yeah.
He was reluctant to do it, and we said, "No, Kel, you got to do this. People really like you singing this song."
Yeah, I love that song. I always felt like that should have been a bigger hit. I know it was like, I think it was the timing, because I feel like if you released that in like 90 or 91, I feel like that would have been at least been a rock, rock radio hit. I don't know.
I agree.
I thought it was great. Now, so I heard you say that in 2012, when you guys did the Hollywood Forever album, you tried to get Kelly back in the band at that point, and Phil shot it down. Do you know why he shot bringing Kelly back at that point?
I don't know why, because when Kelly expressed to me, "Hey, Riley, I'm really ready to jump back into the fray," and I was like, "Kelly, I love the idea." I go, "Listen, why don't you?" Because I knew Scotty could play guitar, and so Scotty could play rhythm guitar or double lead with Stacey Blades. And so I knew that Scotty wouldn't be pushed out of the band, that he could move over to guitar. So I was totally into it. We even had Kelly fly out. We flew him out to LA to sing background and play bass on one of the songs on Hollywood Forever, just so he could be involved with us and work with Andy Johns. And I was all for him into joining and getting back with us. And I don't know, Chuck, I don't know why Phil shot it down. He didn't want to do it. And, I guess before I had gotten Kelly back with me, Phil and Tracii had approached him to see if he wanted to help write some songs on one of their albums that they did together in these last few years.
Oh.
And when they sent Kelly the material to look at and listen to, Kelly said, "Listen, I think that we could even do better than this." He was very, very diplomatic about it. He said, "I think that we could really do better." And that offended Phil so bad that he attacked Kelly in the press. And this is before I got Kelly back. And so he has a problem with Kelly. He has a problem with people, I guess. I don't know where he comes from on that, because Kelly is the coolest guy. He's such a great bass player and songwriter. He's a great artist. He does all the artwork for wherever you see for LA Guns with me and Kelly. And he's just a great guy. I don't know why anybody would have a problem with him. But Phil really took offensive that Kelly said, "Hey, I think that we could even do better." It was very diplomatic, and that offended him so bad that he attacked him in the press. And then by the time I called Kelly, he said, "Yeah, did you see me get attacked in the press by Phil?" And I really didn't see it because I don't read a lot on the internet.
Sure.
But he told me about it, and it was just unfortunate. Another Vince Neil type of thing. It was just uncalled for. It's not needed.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your, besides your music career, you have an acting career. You were in 1998, you had a small role in a movie called Amazon Warrior. Is it true you have a role in an upcoming horror movie called Rightful? Yes. And you have some songs in the movie as well?
I'm sorry?
You have some songs in the movie too, right?
That's exactly how it started. The writer-producer is a friend of mine, and he said, "Do you have some material that you'd like to place in this new Gothic horror movie that I'm doing?" And I presented some songs. They ended up choosing 2 of the songs, and I was happy with that. But when they said, "Would you like to read for a part?" I was taken back. I was like, because I really, I'm not an actor, and I was taken back, and I said, "Yes, I'd love to read for a part." And so I read for a part, and I got it. They gave it to me. They flew me to New Orleans to shoot my couple of scenes that I didn't even know if we're going to make it. But they did. They lasted, and they
cool.
didn't get cut. And so I got a couple of songs in Rightful, and I got a couple of scenes in Rightful. It was a great experience in working with them, him and the director, and they just got distribution, and so it's kind of cool being
Cool.
involved with that.
Yeah, and then is it true you're working on a documentary that's about singers from the grunge era that have died? Like there was 9 singers, and who are Kurt Cobain, Scott Weiland, Lane Staley, Chris Cornell, I'd say Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone. Who else am I missing?
Yeah, there's like 9 of them, and I have the whole thing together, and there's 9 huge singers. The story is such an amazing story, Chuck, that if you look at any decade from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there are still all the big singers from the 60s alive, from the 70s and the 80s. This 90s period of grunge and 90s music, it's not all grunge, but it's an amazing story how that generation from the 90s, they lost their voice. They lost their voices from these bands, these great bands that were together and great singers, and they all died for one thing or another, whether it was suicide, overdose, or what have you. It's just an amazing story. And I started working on it right away. As soon as Phil started doing those shows with Tracii, I started working on this doc because I had the idea for a while. And I got consumed by it too. And the people from Rightful now, the movie, they're working with me on it. And I'm going to figure out exactly how I want to do this. We might do it in 6 parts. We might do it as one whole thing, but we're figuring out how to do it. But I have it all laid out. I have all of the interviews with the people that were involved with these people, and I'm going to pursue it and maybe finish it next year.
Oh, that's awesome. I look forward to that. And then, so what else does the future hold? Like you've said, despite all this talk about LA Guns and stuff, you said you'd never say never in reuniting with the full LA Guns classic lineup. What about the classic W.A.S.P lineup? Is there any talk? You've never reunited with them, right? Since the 80s.
No, it's funny because Randy Piper and I got invited to go to Las Vegas to sit in with the Sin City Sinners. They're a local band that do cover tunes, and Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat was in it, and he would call and get people from LA bands to come out and sit in with them. He called me and said, I got Randy Piper on too. Do you want to fly? We'll fly you to Las Vegas, put you up at a hotel, and we jam some W.A.S.P songs. Well, when that happened, me and Randy reconnected, and we were always friends, but we were kind of separated. We weren't in total touch. He said to me, the 30th anniversary of W.A.S.P is coming up. Would you be interested in doing a 30th anniversary little small tour with the original lineup? I said, Randy, of course I am. I'm always into something like that. And I didn't realize he hadn't talked to Chris Holmes or Blackie about it, just me.
Oh, okay.
And so I told him I was totally into it, but I don't think Blackie was into getting back together with it. And I don't think Chris was, because they had a really bad falling out. But I'm always into something like that. I mean, if Blackie called me and said, let's go do a 20-day tour for the anniversary of W.A.S.P, I would have been right on it. I would have done it.
Okay, that's awesome. And then you guys, like I said, the Renegade album is out for sale, and I heard the vinyl of that is selling out. Do you have other promotional items for the band? And I don't know. This is like, I don't know why LA Guns has been in the news so much lately, but there was a story about how the other LA Guns was selling a LA Guns drumhead that was autographed by the band for $495, but it doesn't even have the original drummer. And some fans thought that was a little steep, according to the story. I'm just reading off. I'm not having an opinion on that. I'm just reading off the story. Do you feel like that's a little, how much would you charge for a signed drumhead from Steve Riley, LA Guns?
Oh, I don't think I charge that much, Chuck. No way. I don't think I charge that much. Okay. It's a little steep. And, it's a little hard on the fans, too, to say, you want to pay $500 for a drumhead. I mean, I sell drumheads signed, stick signed, but they're for very little. They're on our website. Okay. We got laguns.net, and it's got how to order the Renegades album up there, because it's very difficult for fans to find out even where to get the album right now. So laguns.net is where me and Kelly Nichols are running LA Guns out of. and you can find out how to order Renegades there. There's a bunch of great merchandise and some fun videos, and it has our tour dates that we're going to do in 2021. But you know, I tell you what, we're like every other band. You know, we have the T-shirts, the patches, and all of that stuff that you could buy, but it's not steep prices, and we're not trying to gouge anybody. And you know, you got to keep it reasonable. And I think that Golden Robot Records, they did a great job. They put some bundles together.
Oh, cool.
You could buy the album, the T-shirt, and a patch. Everything's put together in different color LPs. So we're trying our hardest to make it easy for fans to get it and affordable.
And then, so you said there is tour dates set up for 2021. Are you coming down the Southwest at all? I'm in Phoenix. Are you anywhere near Phoenix or Vegas or anything like that?
Oh, you know, totally, man. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff. What Kerry and I are going to do is what we're not going to do is the 200 to 250 club shows a day. We don't want to do that anymore. I just finished doing that for like 20 years. It's a grueling schedule. It's not only you going on at 12:30 in the morning, you're staying at a kind of a low down hotel or motel.
Sure.
You're playing on rented gear that's not really up to par. I don't really want to do that anymore. So Kerry and I, we want the band, we're going to do like 40 to 50 shows in the States. They're going to be festivals, fairs, casinos, and then the odd satellite show that might go with one of those shows.
Okay.
But we will definitely be, and nothing got canceled out of 2020. It all got postponed into 2021.
Okay.
So we got a full schedule that starts up in March.
Okay, great. Well, I'll definitely check that out. Hopefully see you guys soon. And then I like to end each episode with promoting a charity of the guest choice. I don't know if your management told you. Is there a charity that you work with or you want to give a quick shout out to?
Yeah, it's City of Hope here in LA.
Okay.
And both my management and I are totally behind that. And it's a great charity.
What is it? What is it?
It's a thing that works with the hospitals and children and all of that, and it helps them out with funds. And it's just a really good situation to help some of these lower people the people that don't have money and they just can't afford stuff. And it's just a good little charity.
That's awesome. Okay, I'll put the link in the notes, and then and obviously your social media as well. Steve, you've had an amazing career this far. I look forward to seeing where you keep going, and we'll definitely look to see you in a show, hopefully, once concerts are legal again. So hopefully that works. Anything else you want to promote? Or
I tell you what, Bo, I just want people to go to laguns.net.
Okay.
You can find out anything that we're doing, especially
Perfect.
with those shows that are coming up. And I want to thank you for your support. You're a good guy, brother, and be safe too out there.
You too. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. You're a great guy. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. So Steve Riley is the man. He is the drummer for LA Guns. There are two versions of the band. So to differentiate between the other version, you're going to want to head over to laguns.net and check out everything they have there. All the links are there. You can buy the album, or of course you can listen to it on Spotify. If you enjoyed this episode of my show, check out some of the other interviews I've done. If you subscribe to the show, you'll never miss any future episodes. If you want to support the show, you can follow me on social media or share any episodes that you liked on social media. And if you really want to go all out, you can write a review on iTunes, because that helps the algorithm so people can find the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, shoot for the moon.